The music was loud. The lights were blinding. Money laughed openly in the room. And then a child cried. Not a dramatic cry. Not the kind people rush to. It was small. Broken. The kind of sound that slips through noise and lands straight in the chest. For half a second, no one reacted. Crystal chandeliers hung above the ballroom of Seoul's Grand Hanseong Hotel, throwing gold across silk dresses and polished shoes. Politicians, CEOs, and men with quiet power filled the room. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. At the side of the hall stood Amari Okoye, a black woman in a deep emerald gown. Calm. Focused. Watching everything. She wasn't rich. She wasn't invited. She was the one who made nights like this work. The planner. The fixer. The woman who smiled so others could shine. She had spent weeks preparing this gala. Every table. Every light. Every glass of wine. Tonight was supposed to end clean. But the cry came again. This time louder. People shifted in their seats. A few heads turned. Someone sighed in annoyance. No one stood up. Amari followed the sound with her eyes. It came from the head table, the most dangerous table in the room. That was when the doors at the back of the hall opened. The room changed. Men straightened their backs. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the air felt heavier. Kang Jae-min had arrived. Tall. Sharp. Dressed in a black tailored suit that looked like it had never known fear. His face showed nothing. Not anger. Not joy. Just control. Everyone in Seoul knew his name. They just didn't say it out loud. Beside him walked a little boy, about 7 years old, neatly dressed, small shoulders stiff, one hand gripping his father's sleeve like letting go would make the world collapse. Amari noticed the child before she noticed the man. The boy's eyes weren't curious. They weren't excited. They were tired. Jaemin took a seat at the head table. Power gathered around him like it always did. Laughter followed. Glasses clinked. Important men leaned closer. The boys stayed silent. The music resumed. Plates were served. The gala continued like nothing was wrong. Then the sob returned. The boy's fork slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor. He tried to speak, but his lips shook. Tears rolled down his cheeks, quiet but unstoppable. Jaemin frowned. Stop, he said under his breath. The word didn't calm the child. It crushed him. The sob turned into crying. A woman at the table leaned toward another guest. Can someone take him out? This is embarrassing. A man chuckled. Even powerful men raise soft children. No one moved. Not the waiters. Not the guards. Not the people who could buy the room 10 times over. Amari felt something twist inside her chest. She looked around, waiting for anyone to help. Nothing. Before her mind could stop her feet were already moving. Gasps rippled through the room as she crossed the space toward the head table. Every step felt louder than the music. You don't interrupt Kang Jae-min. You don't approach his table. You don't look him in the eye unless invited. Amari did all three. She stopped beside the crying boy and knelt down, lowering herself to his level. Her voice was calm, gentle. Hey, she said softly. It's okay. What's wrong? The boy looked at her like she was the first safe thing he'd seen all night. His voice came out in a whisper. I need to pee. Silence slammed into the room. Amari smiled, wiping his tears without hesitation. That's all? Come on. I've got you. She stood and held out her hand. The boy took it immediately. For the first time that night, Jaemin looked directly at her. His gaze was sharp. Warning. Dangerous. She didn't drop the child's hand. Your son just needs help, Amari said quietly. He's not a problem. He's a child. The words landed hard. Without waiting for permission, she walked him out of the ballroom. Whispers exploded behind her. When she returned a few minutes later, the boy was calm, smiling even, still holding her hand like he never wanted to let go. She guided him back to his seat and turned to leave. That was when the boy spoke again. Appa, he said proudly. This is Miss Amari. She used to cook at my kindergarten. She protected me when kids were mean. The room froze. Amari's heart skipped. Jamin stared at her like she had cracked something he thought was sealed forever. The boy hummed a tune under his breath. A simple song.
Soft. Familiar.
Amari recognized it instantly. She used to sing it to children when they were scared. The sound floated through the ballroom. And for the first time in years, Kong Jamin didn't look like a man ruling fear. He looked like a father who had forgotten how to breathe. Amari met his eyes. Children don't need perfection, she said softly. They need someone who listens. No one breathed. Then the night ended. As Amari stepped outside, relieved and ready to disappear back into her normal life, a black car rolled to a stop beside her. The window slid down. Jamin's voice came low and steady. Get in. Amari lifted her chin. Is that a request or an order? A pause. Then, almost amused, he said, a request. For now. The back door opened. The boy sat inside, smiling at her like home. Amari hesitated. She didn't know that this moment would pull her into danger. She didn't know that kindness would cost her peace. She didn't know that helping one child would wake a man the city feared. She only knew one thing. Walking away felt wrong. So she got in. If you felt that moment, if you've ever helped someone without knowing the price, if you believe one act of kindness can change a life, stay with this story. Because what happens after she gets into that car will test loyalty, love, and survival in ways neither of them saw coming. And the next choice she makes will put her directly in the crosshairs of Seoul's most dangerous world. When Amari stepped into the black car, the door closed with a sound that felt final. Not loud, not dramatic, just solid. The kind of sound that says you've crossed into something you can't undo. The inside smelled expensive. Clean leather. Quiet power. The city lights slid past the tinted windows like they didn't belong to her world anymore. Kong Jamin sat across from her. Still. Watching. Saying nothing. Between them sat the boy.
Kong Yoon.
His small body leaned comfortably against the seat, fingers wrapped around Amari's hand like it had always been there. His feet didn't reach the floor. His shoulders were too tense for a child who had just stopped crying. Amari noticed everything. The way his breathing slowed only when she stayed close. The way his eyes flicked to his father, then back to her. The way silence seemed heavier around him than noise.
No one spoke for a while.
The driver focused on the road like his life depended on it. Jamin's voice finally cut through the quiet.
Calm.
Controlled. You didn't ask who I was. Amari didn't pull her hand away from the boy. I know who you are, she said. Everyone in that room does. He studied her face, waiting for fear. It didn't come. Most people flinched in his presence. They chose words carefully. They bent without realizing it. She didn't. And yet, he said slowly, you still did what you did. She shrugged. A child needed help. That table, Jamin said, doesn't get interrupted. She looked at him. Children don't know rules like that. Yoon squeezed her fingers a little tighter. Amari glanced down at him and smiled. You okay? He nodded, then shook his head, then whispered, it's loud there. Her chest tightened. She remembered that feeling. Being small in places made for big people. Smiling when you were uncomfortable because you didn't want to be a problem. She brushed his hair back gently. You don't have to like loud places. Jamin watched the exchange closely. My son, he said, has everything. Amari didn't answer right away. The car turned onto a quieter road. Tall buildings faded into glass towers and shadows. He has comfort, she said carefully. Not everything. The air shifted. Most people lied to him, complimented his wealth, praised his power, talked around the truth like it was dangerous. She walked straight through it. He doesn't talk much, Jamin said. At home, at school, with tutors. Doctors say he's fine. Yoon stared out the window. Amari followed his gaze. He doesn't feel safe enough to be loud. Jamin's jaw tightened. That's not true. Maybe not on purpose, she said. But children feel what adults hide. Silence pressed in again. The car stopped in front of a tall glass building that looked more like a fortress than a home. Guards nodded as the doors opened. The lobby glowed with marble and steel. Yoon hesitated when it was time to get out. Amari noticed immediately. She crouched in front of him. It's okay. I'll walk with you. His eyes lit up just a little. Inside the penthouse, everything was perfect and cold at the same time. Wide windows. Clean lines.
No toys. No worms.
Amari felt it instantly. This place wasn't built for laughter. She helped Yoon onto the couch, covered him with her shawl when he curled up, and watched his eyelids flutter. He fell asleep within minutes. Jaemin stood nearby, arms crossed, looking like a man who didn't know what to do with quiet. He never sleeps this fast, he said. Because he's tired of holding himself together, Amari replied. She straightened and faced him. When was the last time you sat with him? Not supervised. Not scheduled. Just present. His eyes darkened. I provide. That's not the same thing. He took a step closer. You're very comfortable speaking to me this way. Because I'm not talking to you, she said softly. I'm talking about him. He looked at his son. For a moment, the man everyone feared looked unsure. You don't know my world, he said. No, she agreed. But I know loneliness. And it looks the same everywhere. That landed deeper than anger ever could. Yoon stirred, then reached for Amari's hand even in his sleep. Jaemin saw it. Something shifted behind his eyes. You can stay for dinner, he said quietly. She hesitated. If this is about control. It's about my son, he interrupted. And maybe understanding. Dinner was simple. Quiet. No staff hovering too close. No tension in the air that demanded performance. Yoon woke up halfway through, smiling when he saw Amari still there. You didn't leave, he said sleepily. She smiled back. I said I wouldn't. Jaemin watched them. Something heavy settled in his chest. Later, when Amari finally stood to leave, Yoon clung to her sleeve. Will you come back? She looked at Jaemin. He didn't answer. Didn't stop her. I'll see you again, she promised the boy. Outside, the elevator doors slid shut. Jaemin stayed behind, staring at the empty hallway. For the first time in years, the silence in his home felt loud. And somewhere deep inside him, a question he didn't want to ask began to form. What if fear had cost him more than enemies ever could? If you've ever been the child no one listened to, if you've ever grown up beside power that felt cold, if you know how heavy silence can be, stay close to this story. Because the moment that woman walked into his home, something dangerous began. And very soon, the world that fears Kong Jaemin will realize he has something to lose. The moment replayed in Amari's mind the next morning like it was stitched into her memory. The music. The laughter.
The cry.
She hadn't planned to move. That was the part people never understood. Kindness wasn't a strategy for her. It was instinct. And instincts don't ask permission. Back at the gala, when the sound first reached her ears, she felt it before she heard it. A small, broken sound slipping through violins and polite applause. The kind that doesn't demand attention, but begs for it. She scanned the room once.
Twice.
Everyone heard it. No one stood. At the head table, Kong Yoon sat stiff as a statue, shoulders tight, eyes glossy. His fork trembled between his fingers like it weighed too much. The men around him talked louder, as if noise could erase discomfort. A woman leaned back and sighed, annoyed. Another guest whispered something sharp and dismissive. Amari felt her stomach drop.
She knew that look.
That look said, don't be a problem.
It said, hold it in.
It said, be small. She had worn that look herself once. Her heels clicked against the marble as she crossed the room. Each step felt heavier than the last. People noticed. Conversations slowed. Heads turned. This wasn't her place. Everyone knew it. You didn't approach that table. You didn't interrupt Kong Jaemin. You didn't make eye contact unless you wanted trouble. Amari stopped beside the boy and knelt. Gasps rippled outward. She felt Jaemin's presence before she looked up. The weight of him. The silence he carried. The kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice because fear already spoke for him. She ignored it. Her voice dropped low and gentle.
Hey.
What's going on? Yoon's lip trembled. He tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. Tears spilled without permission. His fork slipped and clinked against the plate. The sound echoed too loudly. Amari leaned closer, blocking the room from him with her body. "It's okay," she said. "You're not in trouble." His eyes flicked to his father. Jaemin's expression was tight, controlled, irritated. "Stop crying," he said quietly. The words hit the boy like a wall. Yoon's shoulders shook harder. Amari felt something sharp press into her chest. She looked up at Jaemin then. Not challenging. Not afraid. Just honest. "He's trying," she said. "He just needs a minute." That was when the room froze. No one spoke to Kong Jaemin like that. Amari turned back to the boy. "Tell me what you need." His voice came out as a whisper. "I need to pee." A few people laughed under their breath. Someone rolled their eyes. Amari smiled like it was the easiest thing in the world. "That's all?"
Come on. I've got you.
She stood and held out her hand. Yoon didn't hesitate. He slid his small fingers into hers like he'd been waiting for someone to offer. Jaemin stood abruptly. For a moment, Amari thought he might stop them. Instead, his eyes locked on hers. Sharp. Searching. Warning. She didn't flinch. "Your son needs help," she said quietly. "I'll bring him right back." Without waiting, she led Yoon out of the ballroom. The air outside felt lighter. Quieter. Yoon sniffed as they walked. "I didn't want to make noise." Her heart twisted. "You're allowed to need things." She helped him, waited patiently, washed his hands, and crouched to his level again. "Feeling better?" He nodded. A small smile peeked through. They walked back in together. The boy's hand never left hers. When they returned, the room watched like something important was happening, even if they didn't know what it was. Amari guided Yoon back to his seat, ready to disappear. Then he tugged her sleeve. "Appa," he said proudly, voice clear now. "This is Miss Amari. She used to cook at my kindergarten." Amari's breath caught. "She helped me when kids were mean," he added. She sang that song. He hummed softly. It wasn't loud. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. The music drifted through the ballroom, fragile and warm. The kind of sound that didn't belong in rooms built on power. Jaemin stared at his son. Then at Amari. Something moved behind his eyes. Not anger. Not control. Recognition. Amari met his gaze and spoke softly. "Children don't need fear. They don't need perfection. They need someone who listens." No one dared breathe. For a long moment, Jaemin said nothing. Then he sat back down. The party continued, but something had shifted. Laughter felt forced now. Conversations lost their shine. A truth had slipped into the room, and it refused to leave quietly. When the night ended, Amari slipped toward the exit, heart still racing. She thought it was over. She was wrong. Outside, the black car waited. And inside it sat the man everyone feared, and the child who trusted her. As the door closed behind her, Amari felt it again. That same pull. That same knowing. Helping that boy hadn't been the end of something. It was the beginning of everything. If you've ever stepped forward when no one else would, if you've ever protected a child at personal cost, if you know that kindness can change the direction of a life, hold this story close. Because from this moment on, Amari is no longer invisible, and the world that fears Kong Jaemin is about to realize. That one simple sentence, "Let me help," can shake even the strongest walls. The sound didn't belong in that room. It wasn't polished. It wasn't trained. It wasn't meant to impress. It was soft, uneven,
Real.
Yoon's voice floated out before anyone could stop it. A small hum at first, then clearer. Amari felt it hit her chest before her mind caught up.
She knew that tune.
She hadn't sung it in years. The melody was simple, almost childish. The kind you sing when words are too big and feelings don't know where to go. The kind meant to calm shaking hands and racing hearts. Yoon hummed it with his eyes half closed, like the sound lived somewhere deep inside him. The ballroom went quiet. Not the polite, kind of quiet people fake. The real kind. The kind that takes over. Amari swallowed. "That song," she said softly, more to herself than anyone else. Yoon smiled. "You sang it when I was scared." She knelt beside him again, her movements slow, careful. "You remember that?" He nodded. "When kids were mean, you told me to breathe and listen to the song." Her eyes burned. She hadn't known he remembered. Back then, she was just a woman trying to make small children feel safe in a world that already felt loud and sharp. She hadn't known it mattered. Across the table, Kong Jaemin didn't move. His gaze stayed locked on his son. He had heard that song before. Not the tune exactly, but the silence after it. The quiet that followed comfort. The room felt different now. Less sharp. Less proud. Yoon looked up at his father. She helped me, Appa. Jaemin's throat tightened. He had built his life on control. On preparation. On making sure nothing slipped through his fingers. And yet his son had found safety somewhere else. Not in money. Not in power. Not even in him. Amari stood slowly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She spoke like someone stating a truth that had waited long enough. Children don't need perfect parents, she said. They need present ones. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't a speech meant for them. It was meant for one man. Jaemin's jaw flexed. Most people expected anger. They expected his voice to cut through the room like glass. Instead, he stayed silent, listening. The silence stretched. Amari felt the weight of it, but didn't step back. Fear makes adults feel powerful, she continued quietly. But it makes children feel alone. Yoon leaned into her side, without thinking. The movement was small, but it was everything. Jaemin saw it. For the first time that night, the mask slipped. Not completely. Just enough. The party ended soon after. People left with smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Conversations buzzed with questions no one dared ask out loud. Amari slipped toward the exit, her heart still pounding. She thought of the boy, of the song, of the way his fingers had curled around hers like an anchor. She didn't see Jaemin follow her. Outside, the city hummed. Cars passed. Lights blinked. The black car waited at the curb. The window slid down. Get in, Jaemin said. The words weren't sharp this time. They were uncertain. Amari paused. Why? My son doesn't let people touch him, he said. He doesn't sleep near anyone. He doesn't smile like that. She looked through the open window. Yoon sat inside, buckled in, eyes bright when he saw her. She sings, he said proudly. Something twisted in Jaemin's chest. I need to understand why, he said quietly. Amari hesitated. She had rules. She didn't cross lines like this. But she also knew when a door opened for a reason. She got in. The car pulled away from the hotel, the city falling back into shadows. Inside, the silence felt different now. Yoon leaned against her, already sleepy. He doesn't talk about his mother, Jaemin said suddenly. Amari didn't interrupt. She died when he was young, he continued. After that, I focused on protection. Protection isn't warmth, Amari said gently. No, he admitted. It's control. Yoon yawned and rested his head on Amari's shoulder. Jaemin stiffened, then slowly relaxed. He never does that, he murmured. Because he trusts me, she replied. And because you're here. That surprised him. The car stopped in front of his penthouse. Inside, everything gleamed. Glass. Marble. Space. It felt empty. Amari laid Yoon down on the couch and covered him with her shawl. He smiled in his sleep. Jaemin watched from a distance. You didn't fear me, he said. Amari straightened. I saw your son first. The words settled between them. When she finally turned to leave, Jaemin spoke again. You changed something tonight. She met his gaze. I didn't try to. That's what scares me, he said. The elevator doors closed behind her. Jaemin stood alone in the penthouse, listening to the hum of the city. For the first time in years, he heard that song again in his mind. And for the first time, it didn't hurt. It accused. If you've ever realized too late that the people you love needed you more than your strength, if you've ever heard a memory that forced you to face your own absence, stay connected to the story. Because that song didn't just comfort a child. It woke a man who had built his life on fear. And when men like Kong Jaemin wake up, the world around them never stays the same. The black car waited like it belonged there. Not parked. Placed. Amari felt it before she saw it. The quiet pressure of attention pressing against her back as she stepped out of the hotel. The night air was cool, sharp enough to clear her head. She told herself to breathe. to walk, to forget the weight of what had just happened inside. Then the window rolled down. Calm Jaemin's voice came through the dark, low and steady. "Get in." She stopped. Streetlights reflected off the car's polished surface. People passed on the sidewalk, unaware that something important had paused right there. Amari turned slightly, keeping her distance. "Is that a request or an order?" For a moment, he didn't answer. Then, quieter than before, he said, "A request." That alone unsettled her. Before she could decide, the back door opened. Yoon leaned forward in his seat, eyes lighting up like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Miss Amari." Her resolve softened instantly. She looked at the child, then at the man who watched her like he was trying to read a language he'd never learned. She stepped inside. The door closed with that same solid sound, final, deliberate. The car moved smoothly into traffic, Seoul unfolding in streaks of light outside the windows. Yoon slid closer to her without being asked. His small body relaxed against her arm, his head resting just enough to say, "This feels right." Jaemin noticed. He didn't comment. But something shifted behind his eyes. "You didn't hesitate," he said after a moment. Amari shrugged lightly. "Your son needed me." "He usually doesn't reach for people," Jaemin replied. She glanced down at Yoon. Maybe he's tired of holding himself together. Yoon yawned, like the truth had worn him out. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful. They arrived at the penthouse, glass, height, quiet that felt too big for a child. Guards opened doors with practiced ease. Everything was controlled, measured, distant. Inside, Amari felt it immediately. This wasn't a home. It was a stronghold. She helped Yoon onto the couch. He curled up without protest, eyes fluttering closed. She draped her shawl over him, tucking it around his shoulders the way she'd done 100 times with children who needed comfort more than rules. "He sleeps fast with you," Jaemin said. "Because he doesn't feel like he's being watched," she replied. The words hung there. Jaemin leaned against the far wall, arms crossed. "You speak very freely." "I speak honestly," she said. "There's a difference." He studied her. "Most people soften their words around me. Most people want something from you," she said gently. "I don't." That caught him. He stepped closer. Not threatening. Curious. "You see control," he said. "You call it loneliness." "I see a man who's always bracing for impact," Amari answered. "That's exhausting. Especially when you're doing it alone." Yoon shifted in his sleep, reaching out. His fingers brushed Amari's sleeve and stilled. Jaemin watched the small movement like it mattered more than anything else in the room. "You think I don't try," he said quietly. "I think you try the only way you know how," she replied. "But children don't need protection that feels like distance."
His jaw tightened.
"Distance keeps people alive. And it keeps them apart," she said. "Which one matters more to you right now?" He didn't answer. Dinner happened without ceremony. Simple food. No hovering staff. Yoon woke briefly, smiled at Amari, then drifted back to sleep mid-bite. Later, when Amari stood to leave, Yoon clung to her sleeve again. "Stay," he whispered. She knelt beside him. "I'll come back." "You promise?" She glanced at Jaemin. He didn't stop her. Didn't command her. Just watched. "I promise," she said. In the elevator, Amari leaned back against the wall, heart racing for reasons she couldn't fully explain. She wasn't afraid. That scared her. Above, Jaemin stood alone in the penthouse, staring at the quiet shape of his son on the couch. The space felt different now. Less empty. More aware. He realized something then, something he hadn't prepared for. This woman hadn't challenged his power. She'd challenged his absence. And somehow, without meaning to, she'd crossed a line no one else had ever reached. If you've ever walked into a space that wasn't meant for you, and still chose kindness, if you've ever seen through someone's strength and noticed the ache underneath, stay with this story. Because when a man built on control begins to feel seen, the world around him reacts. And very soon, that black car won't just carry curiosity. It will carry consequences. The morning came too quietly. Amari woke before her alarm, the city still half asleep outside her window. For a moment, she lay still, staring at the ceiling, letting the weight of the past night settle. The child's hand in hers. The man's eyes when he realized he'd been seen. The silence in that penthouse that felt like it was holding its breath. She told herself it was over. Just another event. Just another client. Just another night she'd forget. Her phone buzzed.
Once.
Then again. She frowned and reached for it. The screen lit up with a message from an unknown number. Stay away from Kang Jaemin if you value your life. Her fingers went cold.
No greeting. No explanation.
Just a warning sharp enough to cut. She read it twice. 3 times. Her heart thudded, but she refused to let fear take the lead. Slowly, she deleted the message and sat up. Not today, she whispered. Fear doesn't get to decide for me. Across the city, Kang Jaemin was already awake. He stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, watching Seoul wake up beneath him. His phone lay on the table behind him, screen glowing with images he hadn't asked to see. Photos from the gala. Amari kneeling beside Yoon. Yoon holding her hand. Jaemin watching her like he was trying to remember how to breathe. Juno, his right-hand man, stood a few steps back. They're circulating fast, Juno said. Rival groups are sharing them quietly. Jaemin didn't turn around. What are they saying?
Junho hesitated.
That you've gone soft. That the woman is your weakness. The word hit harder than a threat. Weakness. Jaemin's jaw tightened. Do they know who she is? Not fully, Juno replied. But they're asking questions. Silence stretched. Put eyes on her, Jaemin said finally. Discreet. She must not know.
Junho nodded.
If she's touched. She won't be, Jaemin cut in. Make sure of it. Back in her apartment, Amari tried to focus on normal things.
Coffee.
Emails. A checklist for her next event.
Her phone buzzed again.
This time, it was a message from an assistant she recognized. Mr. Kang requests your presence today.
Urgent.
Her chest tightened. The warning text flashed in her mind. She hesitated. Then she thought of Yoon. Of the way he'd slept without fear. Of the promise she'd made. She grabbed her coat and left. When Amari arrived at the penthouse, the air felt different. Guards stood straighter. Eyes followed her more closely. Something was wrong. Jaemin stood near the window. Phone pressed to his ear, voice sharp in Korean. He ended the call abruptly when he saw her. You came, he said. You asked, she replied. What's going on? He walked toward her, stopping just short of touching distance. This was a mistake. Her brows drew together. Excuse me? Being near me, he said. Near my son. Near this world. Understanding hit her all, at once. They threatened you, she said. They threatened you, he corrected. And that ends now. So what? She asked quietly. You push me away and pretend that fixes it. It keeps you alive. She crossed her arms. That message I got this morning, was that because of you? His eyes flickered. You shouldn't have deleted it, he said. She stared at him. You knew. I suspected, he admitted. And that's exactly why you need distance. Amari shook her head slowly. You don't get to decide my life because you're scared. The word hung between them.
Scared.
You think I'm afraid? He asked. Yes, she said without hesitation. Not of enemies. Of being alone. His expression hardened. You don't understand my world. I understand loneliness, she said. And I understand what happens when you mistake control for safety. He stepped closer. People who get close to me get hurt. And people who stay away, she replied, get forgotten. Silence crashed down. Yoon's laughter echoed faintly from another room, carried by memory more than sound. Jaemin looked away. This ends, he said quietly. For your sake. No, Amari said. It doesn't. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the truth in her eyes. You don't get to protect people by disappearing from them. That's not strength. That's fear wearing armor. His breath hitched. For the first time, he didn't have an answer. She turned toward the door. If staying near you is dangerous, she said over her shoulder, then maybe danger isn't what scares me anymore. She left. Jaemin stood frozen, the echo of her words settling deep in his chest. Somewhere below, Unseen by Amari, two men stepped out of the shadows and followed her down the street. If you've ever been warned to walk away from someone and still felt pulled closer, if you've ever realized fear was the loudest voice in the room, stay with this story. Because from this moment on, Amari is no longer just a name whispered in threats. She's a target, and the next move made in silence will explode into something no one can undo. The rain started without warning. One moment, Amari was driving through the quiet stretch near the bridge, city lights blurred by exhaustion. The next, water slammed against her windshield like the sky had lost patience. She tightened her grip on the wheel. Her mind kept replaying the warning text, Jamin's face when he told her to stay away. The way fear had slipped into his voice even as he tried to sound in control. She told herself she was fine. That's when the road ahead went dark. Two black SUVs slid into place like they'd been waiting for her. One blocked the front. The other locked the back. Her heart dropped. "No," she whispered. She reached for her phone. Too late. A loud crack shattered the driver's side window. Glass sprayed across her arm. Rough hands grabbed her, yanking the door open, dragging her out into the rain. She screamed. The rain soaked her clothes instantly, cold and heavy. The bridge lights flickered overhead, turning everything sharp and unreal. One of the men wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her toward a van. "Move," he barked. Her shoes slipped on the wet ground. Panic flooded her chest. Then the night exploded. Gunfire ripped through the rain. Not wild. Not messy. Precise. The man holding her dropped with a shout. Another spun around, firing blindly into the dark. Shadows moved fast, too fast. Amari stumbled backward, gasping. A body slammed in front of her. Strong arms wrapped around her, shielding her completely. "Don't move," a voice growled above the gunfire. She knew that voice. Jamin. He stood over her like a wall, his body blocking everything. Rain soaked his suit, his hair plastered to his forehead, his eyes burning with something she had never seen before.
Fear.
Not for himself. For her. Shots echoed again. Screams followed. Then silence, broken only by rain and heavy breathing. Jamin's men appeared from the dark, moving with clean urgency. The attackers scattered. One lay motionless. Another crawled, crying. Jamin didn't look at them. He looked at Amari. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. She shook her head, trembling. You knew." "I told you," he snapped, gripping her shoulders. "They would come." "You could have told me the truth," she shouted back, tears mixing with rain. "I deserved that." His jaw clenched. "And you would have still walked into it." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Because I'm not built to run." For a second, they just stared at each other as rain poured down, the bridge lights humming above them. Jamin's control finally broke. He pulled her into his chest, holding her so tightly she could feel his heart racing. "I almost lost you," he said, voice rough. "Do you understand that?" Her hands clutched his soaked jacket. "I'm here." He pulled back, cupping her face, his thumb brushing away rain and tears. "You're under my protection now." Her breath caught. "What does that mean?" "It means no more distance," he said. "No more pretending you're not part of this." The words hung heavy. The rain softened. And then he kissed her. Not gentle, not careful, desperate. Like a man who had stared death in the face and refused to let it take one more thing from him. She froze for half a second. Then she kissed him back. When they finally pulled apart, his forehead rested against hers. "This changes everything," she whispered. "Yes," he said. "That's the point." Hours later, the penthouse was quiet except for the sound of rain against glass. Amari sat wrapped in a towel on the couch, Jamin's oversized shirt hanging loosely from her shoulders. Her hand still shook slightly. Jamin stood a few steps away, jaw tight. "I handled the ones who touched you," he said. She looked up sharply. "You don't say that like it's normal." "It is," he replied. "In my world." She swallowed. "And this me, does that make it worse?" "No," he said without hesitation. "It makes it clear." He walked closer. "You didn't walk into danger tonight. Danger came for you, because of me. And yet, she said softly, you showed up. His voice dropped. I always will. From upstairs, a small voice echoed. Appa. Yoon stood at the top of the stairs, eyes wide with sleep and fear. Amari moved instantly. She climbed the stairs and knelt in front of him. It's okay. You're safe. Jaemin joined them, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. I was scared, Yoon said quietly. I know, Jaemin replied. I won't let anyone hurt you. Either of you. Amari looked at him. Either of you. Later, after Yoon fell back asleep, Amari stood by the window, watching the rain slow to a mist. You can't keep living like this, she said without turning. Every enemy you make will come for the people you love. Jaemin stepped behind her. I know. Silence stretched. I won't push you away again, he said finally. But I can't promise this world won't fight back. She turned to face him. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for truth. He nodded slowly. This was the point of no return, he said. For both of us. She met his gaze, steady and unafraid. Then don't step back, she replied. Step forward. Somewhere deep inside him, something settled. Outside, the rain finally stopped. Inside, nothing would ever be the same again. If you've ever faced danger and realized what you were really afraid of losing, if you've ever stood in the rain and felt your life split into before and after, stay with this story, because that night didn't end the threat. It announced it, and the next choice Jaemin makes will decide whether love can survive the world he built. Morning arrived softly, not with alarms, not with guards speaking into radios, but with sound, music. Amari woke to it drifting through the penthouse like a memory finding its way home. A low hum at first, then a few uneven piano notes. Not perfect, not practiced.
Alive.
She sat up slowly, the events of the night before settling back into her body. The rain, the bridge, the way Jaemin had stood in front of her without thinking. She followed the sound. In the living room, Yoon sat on the piano bench, feet swinging, fingers pressing keys with serious focus. Jaemin stood behind him, guiding his hands with patience Amari hadn't seen in him before. No, like this, Jaemin said quietly. Slow. Yoon laughed. You're bad at teaching. Jaemin almost smiled. Amari stopped in the doorway. This place had never sounded like this. Not once. Yoon noticed her and grinned. Miss Amari, Appa says music makes the house happy. She walked closer. He's right. Jaemin met her eyes. Something passed between them. Not words. Understanding. Breakfast happened together. Simple food.
No tensión.
Yoon talked about school. About a drawing he wanted to finish. About how the piano sounded better today. This house used to be quiet, he said. Too quiet. Jaemin's hand stilled on his cup. Amari noticed. Later, while Yoon worked with his tutor, Amari wandered the penthouse properly for the first time. Everything was expensive. Everything was untouched. Art hung on walls like it had never been lived with. This isn't a home, she said when Jaemin joined her. It's a waiting room.
For what? He asked.
For something real, she replied. She moved to the kitchen and began cooking without asking. The guards exchanged looks. No one stopped her. Smells filled the air.
Warm. Familiar. Human.
By afternoon, even the guards laughed more easily. Someone turned the music back on. Yoon danced without caring who watched. Jaemin leaned against the wall, arms crossed, observing it all like he was afraid to blink. This is dangerous, he said quietly. What? Amari asked. Peace, he answered. It makes people careless. It makes people human, she said. There's a difference. The sound of glass breaking shattered the moment. An alarm blared. Guards moved instantly. Jaemin's body tensed. His voice sharpened. Lock it down. Amari's heart raced as footsteps thundered down the hall. A guard shouted. Another cursed. They tried the service in trance, someone reported. We stopped them. Yoon ran into the room, frightened. Appa. Jaemin knelt immediately. You're safe. Amari watched it all. The speed, the violence just beneath the surface, the way this world refused to let go of him. When Calm returned, she pulled Jamin aside.
They won't stop, she said.
You know that. He nodded.
Ido.
You can't build a home in the middle of a war, she continued. Not for him. Not for us. His jaw tightened. Fear keeps enemies away. And it keeps your son waiting, she replied. Waiting for you. That landed. Jamin looked toward Yoon, who sat quietly now, drawing with careful lines. I built all of this to protect what was mine, he said. But everything I love ends up in danger. Because you're still living like a man with nothing to lose, Amari said. And that's not true anymore. Silence stretched between them. What are you asking me to do? He asked. She held his gaze. Choose. That night, long after Yoon had fallen asleep between them on the couch, Jamin stood by the window again. But this time, he wasn't alone. The city looked the same. He didn't. I don't know how to stop, he admitted. Amari rested her head against his shoulder. Then start with one thing.
What?
Stay. Below them, unseen, figures moved in the dark. And somewhere plans were already being rewritten. If you've ever tried to build peace. While danger circled quietly, if you've ever realized that love demands a choice, not excuses, stay with the story. Because what Jamin decides next won't just change his life. It will start a war he can't walk away from. The meeting room was silent in a way Amari had never felt before. Not respectful silence. Not fearful silence. Waiting silence. Men who had ruled corners of the city sat straight-backed around the long table. Some wore suits. Some wore scars. All of them had survived by understanding one thing. Kong Jamin did not call meetings unless something was about to change. He stood at the head of the table, calm, composed, eyes steady. Amari wasn't in the room. This wasn't her fight. Yoon was at school. Protected. Unaware. That was the point. Jamin rested both hands on the table. I'm stepping back. The words landed slowly. No one spoke. Juno, his right hand, looked up sharply. Boss. I said what I said. Jamin continued. From today, operations fall to you. A murmur rippled through the room. Confusion.
Shock.
Fear dressed as concern.
Junho Soto.
If you walk away, they'll see it as weakness. Let them, Jamin replied. One man laughed nervously. You don't retire from this life. I'm not retiring, Jamin said. I'm chosen. Another voice cut in. Because of the woman? Jamin's gaze lifted, slow and sharp. The room froze. I built this empire to protect what mattered, he said. Somewhere along the way, I forgot what that was. Juno clenched his jaw. And when they come for her? They already have, Jamin said quietly. And that ends. He turned and walked out. The crown was down. Across the city, the response was immediate.
Phones buzzed.
Meetings formed. Smiles appeared where respect once lived. The rival syndicate didn't hide their reaction. They laughed. Kings don't quit, one of them said over a dim table. They fall. By nightfall, Jamin knew. They wouldn't let him walk away. Amari felt it before he said anything. He came home later than usual. Quieter. His shoulders carried a weight she recognized now. You did it, she said softly. He nodded. I stepped away. Her breath caught. And they refused to accept it. The truth settled between them. So this is it, she whispered. This is the last thing, he replied. She searched his face. You promised to choose peace. I did, he said. This is how I protect it. Her hands trembled slightly. You're going back. Once, he said. So no one ever comes back here again. She stepped closer. Then hear me. He looked at her. If you go, she said, voice steady, go knowing you're fighting for a future, not proving who you used to be. His eyes softened. That's the only reason I'm standing, he said. Later that night, Yoon refused to sleep. He sat between them on the couch, holding Amari's fingers. Appa, you're not leaving forever, right? Jamin knelt in front of him.
No.
I'm coming back. You promise? Yoon asked. Jamin didn't answer quickly. Then he nodded. I promise. Outside, engines started in the dark. Amari stood at the window, watching headlights move like distant stars. She turned back to Jamin. If this is the end of the old you. He met her gaze. Then it's the beginning of something better. Rain began to fall again. Not heavy. Just enough. And somewhere beneath the city, weapons were being loaded, messages sent, lines crossed for the last time. The crown was down. But the war wasn't finished. If you've ever watched someone you love walk toward danger for the sake of peace, if you've ever learned that choosing love doesn't cancel the past, stay with the story. Because the next time Jamin walks into the night, there is no guarantee the city will let him return. And the final chapter will decide whether love survives the cost of power. The bridge looked the same. Cold concrete. Flickering lights. Water rushing below like it didn't care who lived or died above it. Rain fell again, light but steady, soaking the night in memory. This was where Amari had almost been taken. This was where fear had tried to claim her. Now Jamin stood there alone. Not as a king, not as a ruler, but as a man who had decided what mattered. The rival syndicate arrived in silence. Cars stopped. Doors opened. Boots hit wet ground. You could have stayed gone, one of them said, stepping forward. Peace doesn't belong to men like you. Jamin's voice was calm. It does now. Gunfire cracked through the night. Not chaos, control. Jamin moved with purpose, every step guided by one thought. Go home. He wasn't fighting for territory. He wasn't proving dominance. He was ending it. When it was over, dawn crept in quietly, pale light spreading across the bridge like forgiveness. Jamin leaned against the railing, blood darkening his sleeve, breath steady despite the pain. The city was silent. For the first time in his life, so was his mind. Hours later, Amari stood by the door of the penthouse, hands shaking as sirens faded in the distance. Then the door opened. Jamin stood there, wounded, exhausted, alive.
She didn't speak.
She ran into his arms. You came back, she whispered, voice breaking. I promised, he replied, holding her tighter than ever. And I meant it. From the hallway, Yoon appeared, eyes wide. Appa. Jamin knelt despite the pain, opening his arms. I'm here. Yoon crashed into him, sobbing with relief. That was the moment. Not the gunfire. Not the victory. That was the moment Jamin stopped being feared and became chosen. Weeks passed. The guards grew fewer. The nights grew quieter. The penthouse filled with sound, music, laughter, life. Jamin sold what needed to be sold, closed what needed to end. He didn't look back. Together, they built something new.
A café.
Then another. Warm spaces filled with African spices and Korean comfort food. Music played softly. Stories lived on the walls. Yoon ran between tables, humming the song that had started everything. They named it Hanayam, a blend of family, culture, and choice. People came for the food. They stayed for the feeling. One evening, as fireworks lit the Seoul sky, Amari leaned into Jamin on the balcony. You don't scare me anymore, she said. He smiled softly. Good. I don't want to. Below them, Yoon laughed, pointing at the lights. This was their home, not built on blood, but on courage, on presence, on love. And though the city would never forget the man Jamin used to be, the people who mattered only knew the one he chose to become. If this story touched you, if you believe one choice can rewrite a life, if you know kindness isn't weak, just brave,
Subscribe.
because somewhere out there, another child is crying. Another heart is closed. Another life is waiting for one person to say, let me help. And that choice might change everything.